There's nothing more dramatic than being a cat.
What the fuck? It's very true, especially my cat. I don't know if we're keeping the loud meow that was in before we started this, but man, I've tried feeding them more than they're supposed to eat. I've tried feeding them just the right amount. You thought I was going to say less. No, I'm a good cat dad.
You'd be starving them.
They just like food. They like what they like.
I mean, me too, I guess.
I don't know, man. We recorded a little thing before this, and Mike said it was wrong. We had a really good segue about working out.
Getting buff.
That's about it. There's nothing I want to talk about because I've been waking up. I'm waking up every day.
That's a good start.
Pollen's been fucking me up, dude.
Oh, no.
It has been terrible. Like, my eyes just feel
seeping
swollen.
Through the walls somehow.
Well, there's an outlet that's over there that when it was cold, I found out that it just, the insulation, it's an outlet. It's a breach in the hull, so to speak. So you can feel the cold air coming through. And I'm wondering if that's where they come in.
Could be, because I know in my apartment, you'd probably die there too, because the balcony door doesn't really suction closed. And I noticed this when it gets really cold. I actually had them fix it once because it was really bad before. Bugs were able to crawl through this crack. It would freeze the entire apartment, or vice versa. It would make it super hot in the summer. So it's better now, but still, I can still tell there's a little some wind come through.
No. That's why.
It's not so nice.
Staying there when I did that one time was rough for me.
I taped it one time too.
Yeah, no, that's worth it. So it's still doing it right now?
Yes, but it's not nearly as bad. So it's like trickle damage.
I swear. Also, I'm playing a lot of TTRPGs as of late.
Yeah.
I think I'm finally doing Cyberpunk Red tomorrow. We'll see how that goes. Because Koss is shortening our Zelda 5e campaign by an hour, I think, because he needs to, because he's got a fancy show that he's releasing.
Squeezing it in.
So I'm squeezing it in. Plus, it's for a friend's birthday, so that'll be fun. But much like Pollen.
And you can then compare. Sorry, I don't want to break up your segue, but you can see how much it compares to the video game Cyberpunk.
I don't think it's going to compare at all.
No, I don't believe it will. But you'll probably have the same perks.
Yeah, I've watched at least one video by somebody. There's an entire character trait that's gone. Charisma, strength, blah, blah, blah. There's an entire one that's gone. And I think I'm not sure what it pertained to. I can't remember anymore what. We'll do research on that if we do an episode for it. And I don't know. I'm curious to see a lot of the action-based stuff and how much stuff you can do in a turn. Because it's been a lot of things that are on my mind lately. But much like Pollen.
Much like Pollen.
Shit's invisible.
Whoa.
You don't know where it is. You don't know how you're fighting it, where it's going. You don't know where the hell this shit's attacking you from.
Viruses.
And we were talking hey, what are we going to do episodes for this kind of thing, this old shebang? I've been thinking a lot about Theater of the Mind.
Theater of the Mind.
Which is kind of invisible, You've probably watched, or maybe you've listened to The Adventure Zone, which did their entire campaign, Theater of the Mind. I think they did on Skype. They shared some icons and pictures for, they're old. They did Skype.
Yeah.
Crazy guys. They did that. And then you got Critical Role, which
that probably came out before Discord was big.
No.
Really?
It was right then and there. Let me see.
Critical Role, they have a podcast form, but they use more of a visual medium for sure. I mean, if you ever watch, especially their new stuff, my God.
Yeah.
I don't know if he buys those things or if a mixture of that and they get sponsored with stuff, but my God, the minis, the terrain stuff that guy, Matthew Mercer, brings to the game is insane. He even makes different maps, waiting to see if the party goes there, and then pulls it out if they go there. It's these gigantic maps.
Well, he's got that resource, It's the Matt Mercer effect. You've got to have all this stuff. You got to be super prepared. But what happens when you're a little DM who's got a 9-to-5 job, and that job isn't playing TTRPGs that pay and a massive sum of money to give you shit, and you don't have the time to either prep, an entire battlefield or draw stuff out or learn a virtual tabletop. What do you do? And is that the only reason you do Theater of the Mind, or is there other stuff going on there? Because he's got a couple of reasons that aren't purely for time related stuff.
I do.
They aren't.
Yeah.
But he's Ryan.
He's Braxton. We're the Dungeon Crawl.
Dungeon Bungin. We're gonna talk about Theater of the Mind, when to do, when not, pros and cons, when a full blown out thing like Crit Roll is worth it. Or I don't know what you want to do and how it relates to other systems, because believe it or not, it works better in some than it does in others.
Yes, and some even explicitly they don't even have map grid based combat.
This is true.
So I found this interesting. I looked up a little bit what Theater of the Mind is and where it came from, the idea. I guess if I should probably preface this by saying Theater of the Mind is playing without a map. It's complete imagination, no maps, no grids, no minis. just pure dice more often than not, unless you're playing a system that has no dice. But the term comes from an old radio play, or from old radio plays, I should say. There's a guy, an actor in those called Steve Allen, and he said, radio is the theater of the mind. Television is the theater of the mindless. Now, does that transfer? Do you think maps are the theater of the mindless? And theater of the mind is just pure imagination?
I want to look at it as like a computer. You're freeing up your resources in your brain for other things.
Yes, yeah.
For tactical movement, more nuance in battle, and you're bolstering that imagination, giving it a stronger basis to work off of and create more fanciful things in your mind. Just like how the humanity builds off of our current technology and science.
Because tabletop RPGs already use your imagination. It's not like you're foregoing imagination, period, if you're not doing theater of the mind.
Yeah.
But he's an old soul. He's did radio plays, and TV came out. And he was like, "They're taking my job." That's probably what that comment came from.
I mean, I get it. You got books,
True. Yeah, books.
I don't know too many of them, but
then Mike Merles, the co-creator of Fifth Edition, he actually said that it was a book or something that he made that did not really focus a lot on maps, and some guy got mad at him on Twitter. And he was like, well, I prefer to focus on the imaginative aspect of, theater of the mind type combat and type stuff, because that's what makes tabletop RPGs unique, that you can do it through without anything.
Yeah.
So even the co-creator of Fifth Edition also has a tendency to like theater of the mind more than other stuff.
I want to tackle it from a different angle then. It's also a bit of an accessibility sort of thing. Some people, I've done a lot of reading into this because I'm like, is it real? Is it not? Do some people have aphantasia or the ability to not picture shit in their mind?
It's true.
Just from an accessibility point, maybe those people can't even see what's going on in their head and they're just missing out on the game as a whole. Is that something you bring into your session zeros to figure out?
Yeah.
It's definitely something you talk about in session zero.
100%. And I think it's an interesting thing with aphantasia. It means they're unable to visualize imagery. That would be a difficulty with all tabletop RPGs. And I think it's not necessarily the case, maybe to a certain point. Obviously, like you said, you bring it up in the session zero, and then the DM and you can, or the game master, and you can work out ways to make it work. I think there's ways you can accommodate that. But even with players that don't have aphantasia, I think it can still be very difficult to visualize what's happening in a theater of the mind based combat.
There's so many doors I can take until my mind is just done with trying to put this map in my brain. It's like one of those, not Gearbox, sorry, Borderlands developers, but your 3D map design for the level map itself. Have you remember those things are terrible. The Firehawk's lair specifically, I get lost in that every fucking time. There's tunnels on another tunnel, and I keep looping around it. Maybe I'm just an idiot.
The only one I remember was the zombie DLC.
That one was good.
That's great.
That's great. It's like Red Dead Redemption 1. You play that zombie DLC? That was phenomenal.
I didn't even play the game, but I bought that.
Have you played Red Dead 1?
Yes, I have since. But I just saw it on sale, and I was like, Mom, that looks cool.
I wouldn't say no to playing Red Dead 2 first. As your first exposure to it from a story perspective?
Yes, I think it's definitely like a prequel type stuff. It's not needed, but it definitely adds to the story.
Yeah, I mean, it's that argument of, sorry, JoJo fans, if you start at part 4 and you have no idea the significance of half of the characters, just like Red Dead Redemption 1. A lot of these characters you learn about your old gang, and it's like, who are these people, and why does John Marston, why does he hear about them, and blah, blah, blah. But back to Theater of the Mind and whatnot. I don't know if you had another segue there, but for you, what's been your choice so far for your games? Obviously, I know, but
I prefer a mix. I use maps for majority of combat, and you can see if you're on our YouTube here, you can see the map that I use, the classic Chessex, I think, map.
Yeah, the dry
Chessex.
erase boy.
What erase, to be exact. I thought it was dry.
Big difference.
Yes, yeah, because you don't want dry erase on one of these things because it'll just destroy or not, destroy your map, really, not your actual map, but your map that you draw. So I prefer something like this. I would love to get the stuff that Matthew Mercer has, but that's a lot of cash.
Yes, for one-time use. Well, sometimes there's a lot of Lego stuff.
Sure, that'd be really cool. But the difficulty then is the players have seen it. It's not as exciting the next time you look at it.
Yeah.
I've also thought about my girlfriend brought this up about actually using Legos to make little houses and stuff. That could be cute.
You did something with paper once, and it did add to it.
Yeah, I used paper for houses.
Yeah.
And we put those on the map. That was
the
fun.
one time you give the party elevation and they figure out how to abuse that shit was
I was like, yeah,
good.
I'm climbing
I was
on
like, I'm getting up
things.
there, and then an AoE went to everybody else. I'm like, I'm just over here on this building killing stuff.
Well, because of that, that's why I like.
Yeah,
the
it added an option. It's not just, I'm a hexblade who curses something and whacks it a shitload of times. I'm now a hexblade who curses shit and whacks it a lot of times on a rooftop.
True.
Just a
So
lot
I think
cooler.
otherwise, if I just not had any visual representation of that, just said it, you might have still gone on top of it, but you probably wouldn't have thought about it right away.
No, not at all. I don't think I would have. Generally, it's like, hey, where are they? And am I close to them? Can I hit them? The questions you ask in combat when you don't have a map are entirely different. Mm-hmm. I think every combat we've had, there has been this.
Every combat that I deem needs one.
Yeah.
There's some, like I said, the mix.
It's been a while since we have it.
Yeah, it's usually only used for if it's one person fighting one small thing, or if I'm like, this fight's gonna last 2 rounds, or it's not even it's like a straight hallway and it's like 2 creatures. Like, it's not things that can be resolved fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Is what I use those for.
Yeah. For example, I think in the early Dungeon Chronicles, the first kind of go we did at our live play when I was DMing was, for the first part of it, entirely Theater of the Mind.
Yes, yeah.
And I was still using movement and whatnot. Fairly simple environments still, but meaningful combat was happening. And particularly Kenneth had a character that needed to be within a close range or within a certain position. And we would have to be like, I guess you're like 5 feet at the start. Where would you be at the start of combat? And that was an often question that we would have for Theater of the Mind.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more flexibility you have to have for Theater of the Mind. For stuff like that, but also just for like memorizing stuff. Because the DM already is juggling so many different things. And so let's say Ken is 40 feet away from the creature and he's got 50 feet of movement or something, but the creature's before him, so it moves 20 feet. You forgot how many feet it already had moved or how far away is before, and you got to do math in your head. And then Ken is like, all right, how far away is it from me now? Move 20 feet to my right. And you're like trying to figure this all out. And I think you could get really bogged down in that. But I think the beauty of Theater of the Mind is that I think when people are going into a campaign that's based around that, everyone's a little more relaxed. But, okay, 20 feet, you're close enough to do what you want to do. Yeah, go for it.
If you're the type of person that played Divinity Original Sin and Divinity
Yeah.
Original Sin 2, and you don't enjoy finding the single pixel that allows them to fit into the AoE of your attack or the terrain that you create, Theater of the Mind might be your shit, because maybe you
turn in the camera.
You're fine with the DM saying, yeah, you're in range. It's fine.
Close enough.
It's definitely a more casual environment, at least in terms of just like tactical shape. We're not playing Fire Emblem here.
I think some classes even work better in Theater of the Mind, like pure martial classes. Like I run up to the closest guy and swing.
Yeah, just whack.
Wild
Easy. AoE's like, how many people can I fit?
Yeah, AoE stuff. You could even, I could see AoE people forgetting that there's 5 guys clumped together because you can't see them physically. You don't know how close they are. So you're like, yeah, I'm not gonna use my fireball because I don't know how close they are.
Yeah, keeping track of Sickening Radiance would suck.
Oh my
An
goodness.
AoE that just stays on field. If people enter it, they take damage. If they stay in it, at the end of their turn, they take damage. And it's like, at some point, I wouldn't blame the DM for saying, yeah, they've walked enough. They're probably out of it at this point, when in actuality, if this was on a map, they may or may not be still inside of it, which
No idea.
either nerfs or buffs you. It's pretty different. And then before I move on to like extra systems in particular, is there a thought path you want to go on, or any kind of note that you
The way I conglomerated, that's a word. My notes was just pros and cons. I can go in any direction here.
Okay. Something I found really interesting when we first suggested this, or that I've been thinking about this week, is like, would this work, Theater of the Mind, in Pathfinder? And at first I was saying like a strict no, and then it's tabletop RPGs, you can change and adjust stuff,
Make it
but
work if you needed to, yeah.
just the way the movement
It
works.
wouldn't be as fun, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think so. There's a lot more focus on combos and working together. And in 5e, you can kind of figure shit
Number
out.
crunching.
Yeah, number crunching. And the movement in Pathfinder 2nd edition, I don't know if it's the same in 1st, but if you move at all, and you stop, you say you're ending your stride, your action that is allowing you to move, you can't move again. Like, it's done. It's finished. You have to assign another action to movement, which then again allows you to move another maximum feet equal to your movement. So there's a lot more going on there with the ability to move and reposition things. I don't feel like it would work.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because theater of the mind, from my understanding, was fairly standard until about third edition of D&D. And it was used, like, of course, people use maps and whatnot, but it wasn't as much utilized as it is today.
I guess I would have to look at the rule book to see, like, if that leans credence to it.
Well, the rules were always there, but it was like if you went to conventions and stuff, I mean, because it's, bringing maps and stuff can be annoying.
Yeah.
So people just did Theater of the Mind, and 3.5 edition, which is what Pathfinder's based on, or at least the original one. Second edition obviously jumped a little farther from that. Changed that and hardly mentioned any other way to play other than without a map. So that's when they included like specific grid-based combat and every little detail about like paying attention to where your movements are and the AoEs. I'm sure they were there before, but 3.5 edition is when it really got into people started picking up maps. Like I read one guy's article talking about how he went to a convention when 3.5e was released, and all the Chessex maps were sold out. All these big map stores were just completely just ransacked.
Makes sense.
So it's interesting because, if Pathfinder came from that, that's probably why it's more bogged down into the tactical-based combat.
Yeah. There's another aspect when it came about that I'm sure the first person who realized when you think about things in a vertical space with squares, shit gets crazy. There's like different schools of thoughts, not algorithms, but equations to figure out how much of a sphere will fit into a certain amount of things. It's represented differently. When you look at a flat plane, it's not the same rule going from a diagonal as it is a vertical diagonal that has a horizontal and a vertical movement. It's entirely different. Some spaces have more value.
Did you ever see that movie and a book series called Flatland?
No.
It was like about geometry and shapes, but they were a flat 2D shape, and then they went into the third dimension. Is
this like the discussion on the YouTube loophole, the thread you go down when people are talking about like the 18th dimension?
No, it was a children's book.
Oh, okay.
That I read for my geometry class, but it's minorly interesting. But it delves into the idea of that concept.
I will say a good rule of thumb if you're struggling going from Theater of the Mind to map is if the AoE fills more than half of that square, it is in it.
Yes.
If it is any amount, like 49% of the square, it is not in that square. That's how you can visualize it, at least. And making sure you have, maybe you don't already have, I would recommend, Ryan's got these wonderful AoE shapes that are super nice. I would really recommend looking up like standard size for those. They're
from, the ones I own are from a brand called Arknight.
Nice game.
But they are really cool, and you can make your own.
Oh, wow,
I thought about making my own, but they were, crafts. I'm not good with crafts. But there are ways, like diagrams people have made to make your own and measurements and stuff. So if you want to, it's probably cheaper, I would imagine. So you could easily do that on your own.
Another rule of thumb is start these shapes on the line, not at the center of the square that you're fighting from.
That's right.
It is the very edge of that square that you've got, or whatever dot says it's the origin of the shape. Put it on that line. That's how far out it goes. It will both help your players because they can probably fit more people in it, and hurt them because your villain can fit more people in it. And an easy way to understand and check if the ones that you have do this is just get like a 10-foot line. See if it does indeed go from start to the very last line of 2 squares, and you know exactly where it starts from. It's pretty straightforward, but for example, like jumping in kind of the cons of it, we're already talking about all of these extra things that are going in your game, things you have to keep track of, rules that you have to argue over. It gets it gets expensive, and it's happening a lot now that we're late game in 12th level where we're shooting AoE spells. And like, can we get every one of these enemies
we take out this big circle, we're moving it around, trying to figure it right.
It's fairly odd. Ryan's like, I don't know if you can get all of them. Also, I don't want all my guys dead now.
right when we just started.
Right when we just started. Very reasonably, he's never like squashing around, but it's fumbling around with stuff when you would rather just be thinking in your brain. You're like, you can probably hit him -1 just because I feel like it. So that's like that's my first big con with it, I would say.
Yeah, I'd say for continuing with that is the expense. Obviously, they're cheap ways to get like this map. I think it was like $20. You can buy a pack of these wet erase markers and a spray bottle. pretty cheap. But if you want to get a little more into it, then you got some minis that you add on top of that. And minis can get expensive. You get some really nice ones. And then if you're getting already painted minis, that's an extra cost. If you want to paint them yourselves, it's still a minorly extra cost and then some time cost. Or if you want to go like Dwarven Forge, that's a very expensive cost.
If you're going to play a lot of TTRPGs, hell, be an early adopter of 3D printing.
Yeah, 3D printing can definitely help cut down those costs.
If not in the front, but
eventually,
say how many do some math. Say how many minis am I going to buy within probably 5 years, and then just chalk a number in there and see how much that would cost. And if it's more than the amount that you would spend on a 3D printer and resin for that amount of time, go for it. Maybe you don't want to do that much math. I don't know.
Because Dwarven Forge, if they're listening, I would love your products. So this is not a knock on your products, but my goodness, they're very expensive.
They are.
If you want to get a city core set painted, $210. It comes with a lot of stuff, right? It comes with stairs, some chimneys.
I love stairs.
It comes with what you would need to build a house for $210. That's you can make 3 houses with that.
It's good.
Your player, yeah, it's good, but your players can't. That's like an extra thing because your players can't even really play inside these houses. They're pretty. It's more like decoration. Dwarven Forge is super cool, but yeah, if you want to get that stuff, it's expensive, and it requires extra setup time of making it the way you want it. Like I said, Matthew Mercer, he builds his ahead of time and then just pops it down in front of the group, so it can add up pretty quickly.
I'm curious, how many. We haven't played with a bunch of people in the world, and I'm going to be looking this up in the background, but what do you think of distribution of people that not that do, but prefer Theater of the Mind or prefer having a map? Not people that do, because we know money sucks and more people probably do Theater of the Mind.
It's an interesting topic because there's a lot of discourse on it. Some people that prefer Theater of the Mind say it's the way to go. This is the kind of like what Mike Morales was saying. This is the tabletop experience. Do it. And other people like maps is like this weird dichotomy where people can't find a middle ground, and everyone uses one or the other that they think they're the right cookie. I'm sure Sly Flourish probably has a poll somewhere on his Twitter.
I don't know if Sly Flourish does. I find a relatively small sample size. Each of the votes is probably like 200 people. How does your group incorporate minis and a grid using just Theater of the Mind? So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 options here. First one's all grid all the time. Anytime there is an encounter where position matters, we use miniatures, which is similar to what we do, kind of. All Theater of the Mind all the time. The DM describes, players ask questions, we work from there. The next one is generally we use minis, but for brief combat or other situations, Theater of the Mind is fine. There you go. That's us. Generally, we go Theater of the Mind, but for big, complex battle maps come out, and we use an equal mix of both, depending on mood and situation. So a lot of these options are kind of similar, I'm noticing. But the biggest one is generally we use minis, but for brief combat or other situations, Theater of the Mind is fine at 33.6%. Next runner-up is all grid all the time. Least popular one is all Theater of the Mind, actually. Least popular. So people like, at least according to this very, very small thread done by, I don't know. I can't even find it. Is it L Remen on what forum? Morris Unofficial Tabletop RPG News.
Okay.
Thank you. But yeah, that was a little interesting hop in here.
I did see. I was curious. Sly Flourish actually has an article on his website where he talks about Theater of the Mind. So if you want to, we like Sly Flourish, so go check out his article.
Even Foundry VTT has a tip series that did. This video came out in September 2020. Tip number 1 is the first one actually. D&D Theater of the Mind maps. VTT is making one.
VTT
for the first tips segment there. I found that really interesting. For me as a player,
what's your preference?
I think if I had a DM that was about to go 100% Theater of the Mind, I would fork over the roughly like $20 for this and a marker.
He said, "I got you, pal."
I'm like, you know what? Let's fucking do it. Because I think that's a low enough barrier of entry to have a single plane of you don't even have to draw anything. I just want to be able to move and use a spell. Let's just throw minis on a map. And I think that's probably the most common form of play. Maybe a marker, something to represent players. Maybe they're fucking sorry little boys from the board game.
Yeah, you could use anything
literally
for that stuff. Could be bottle caps.
Anything. And that'll become a memory too. But I guess that's kind of my recommendation is to push at least for some form of a single plane at least.
Did I have this for our first session?
I think so.
I think so.
I think you did. It was neither wrinkled nor curled, nice and fresh, laying on that table in that other apartment.
I can't remember if I had that or if I'd printed it, because I know I have printed out maps on paper with grids on it.
I think for the Delian 2, you had it printed.
I think you're right. I think for our very first session, I had them printed. I was like,
Yeah.
shit, I like this. And I went out and bought this bad boy.
I think there's a tactile feeling to having an actual map that's fun.
I wrote in my cons here that it can like slow down your games to write a map on the fly, and it does, but it doesn't really slow down that much. You know, people are rolling initiative, they're getting their character ready for combat, whatever, and you have enough time to quickly jot down it. Like I just have a random circle on here.
We haven't done like a full dungeon crawl wink in a while.
No.
The last one I remember is...
I remember the snake temple. It's the last one I remember. At least that I wrote, like physically wrote the entire dungeon on this map.
When was the last time we did like a manor or castle? There's no way that's my most recent memory.
No, it's been a while.
Because that's long. It might have been Strahd's Castle. I think that is what I'm remembering, where we found the dude that was doing the calculations and the...
Yeah, that was Strahd's Castle.
Okay, yeah, that's the most significant memory I have, because you had drawn the full thing.
Yes.
And you removed paper.
Yeah.
And that's another difficulty.
See, I did that on the snake temple too. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if you remember that part, but
I remember it like, I don't know.
It was much shorter, of course. But yeah, the interesting thing about the temple was I thought about buying 2 maps, because I couldn't, not the temple, the Strahd's Castle, because I couldn't fit it all on here. So it was like, what's the most important stuff? And so I drew it out here and covered it up with paper.
I'm like, what do you do? What's the best option then? Why did you come to removing the paper rather than just having like the full layout, or doing what you usually do, which is like drawing it as we go into a new room?
Because I know Braxton, and there's still the complaint of so many doors. And the problem with dungeons, first of all, I think with Theater of the Mind, even with a map, it can be confusing to remember where things are.
It's more intimidating.
Yeah, so if you have it laid out, you can at least say, okay, we came here. This is the room we met that guy and where we fought these things. Okay, all right, I got you. Let's head back here. We haven't explored this part of the area. It's like having a video game map. You see like areas still covered in fog. You're like, okay, I haven't explored there.
Doors are easier in video games, I feel, marginally, because you can move in the space physically.
Yeah.
But when you see like 2 or 3 doors in a TTRPG, there's still less control on the player's side. So at least for me, when I see 4 doors, I'm like, I don't even know if we're ever going to come back here.
And odds are they all lead to the exact same place.
It's always simpler than you expect it to be. It's intimidating. So I think that's the biggest issue, is deciding how you reveal the map and how...
And some VTTs have Fog of War, and
they do great with it. There's a big learning curve. T for the Pathfinder game, my GM, I say for Pathfinder specifically, really utilized the lighting. I don't know if it's an engine or just feature within
Foundry.
Roll20, actually.
Roll20. Yeah, they have a really cool one.
Yeah, so he's been using that a lot, revealing and hiding things as we go to certain doors. And there's a meme in the Abomination Vaults. There are so many doors that we go in front of that we're like, okay, we're going to do a perception check, put our little ears to it, or like smell and try to sniff. And he's like, oh, you don't hear anything on the other side. And we open it. It's like a fucking 5 or 10 foot airlock, like a little corridor, just a 5 foot square to another door. And I get it from the dungeon design perspective. It's probably to space stuff out to add more room for the room that's preceding this. But it was so funny because we'd seen so many of them. There's a clip on my Twitch where we're sure that this is going to be a 5 foot airlock. And we listen and I'm like, is it, does it, I roll 20, not on that one, on a perception check. And I go, oh, does it sound like a 5 foot airlock? And he goes, I hear his smile on his face. He goes, no. And I open it, and as he reveals the light, he goes, it's a 10 foot airlock. And I hated him so much for that. But
yeah, there's a weird thing with dungeon design of leading players to dead ends for no purpose. There's nothing there. It's okay, now we gotta go back.
Those random dungeon generators really like to do that.
Yes, random dungeon generators have that. And then the waiting room, the waiting hallway between other rooms happens all the time. I don't know what the purpose of those things are. Maybe to slow things down.
It's either that or spacing shit out, I think. Because if you have a room that's literally connected to another room without a corridor in between it, it can limit your space and your design just a small amount. You can spread things out. It still doesn't make it any less silly, I would say. For Theater of the Mind, like another big con, I don't think I definitely don't have aphantasia because I can see shit in my brain. That's a weird subject for me. Aphantasia in general, but I don't know. I think having Theater of the Mind exclusively doesn't speak to the, like I mentioned earlier, tactile desire for satisfying mechanic combat. It removes like an entire asset I have a little bit. I think even when it's a dungeon that we're crawling through, it's very common that we only have grids for a fight in a fairly small, like 3-chambered dungeon, I would say. And that definitely makes sense. But for some reason, not seeing the rooms on occasion, and I don't think about it during the session, but after, like, man, it's more fun to see the dungeon and see it grow as we go. It's like a sense of progress. And we talked about that a good bit for a while when the Dungeon Chronicles first started coming out, and it was a little point of a contingency. I think I was like, I want a map. And you're like, well, I don't know if I want to have a map for everything.
Oh,
I get that.
It can be tough.
It can be. It can for sure be tough. So I think it's honestly like the first decision you should make or one of the first decisions.
Yeah, I think if you're going pure, and I don't mean this in like the kind of way, I mean this in what I'm about to say, more like the nicer way. It's more of a casual experience to use Theater of the Mind. Because
it's casual.
Because there's less, like you said, there's less rules that I guess you could get bogged down. But I think if you're going Theater of the Mind, you need to have it built on the idea that, all right, we're going to be a little more flexible with stuff. It's going to be less intense, less tactical combat. We're just going to kind of use the combat when we need to, RP the combat like crazy, have fun with it.
More room for, not necessarily. There's more of your brain bandwidth for cool shit. Like I run up to the dude, he's flying 10 feet in the air, I do a jump. You're like, you know what, fuck it. You ran enough. You got that 10 feet of movement.
You're not stuck with the moving around in the map.
Which is why I think Taz works so well, the Adventure Zone. And I found out it started in 2014. The first arc ended in 2017. So it came while Discord had started. Yeah, I think it worked really well. And I never, while listening to it, was wanting for that aspect. Because it was podcasts that I usually listen to while I'm sleeping. And sometimes they'd be like, hey, we're looking at the monster here. It looks like this. And that's about all the physical representation they had. He would sometimes throw goofy drawings on the screen. I think they had a group whiteboard. But I think if I was sitting down, like watching a TV show or something more produced like Critical Role, I would want to look at it.
Yeah.
It's a bit more fun.
Well, that's the fun thing about having a map and minis is that you can, if you get the mini, and a lot of times I don't have this, but if you have the mini that looks exactly like the creature, you could like bust down the table and people can
You're like, oh, I hate terrified. That guy. Yeah.
Yeah, so it can be really fun. Like the final boss of the first campaign for Critical Role, like it was like this big mini that he like pulled out and people were like, oh my God, that's what we're fighting. Like, that's a cool little experience because it's one thing to describe it, but it's another thing to actually like physically look at it.
Yeah. Using your imagination is great, but we as humans go through life perceiving things. So it kind of calls out to that, I would say. And I mean, from my perspective on all the forms that you do, session 0, figuring it out. But 100%. That's pretty much my full thoughts on like sort of shtick, I would say.
Yeah, there's something that I was thinking about that could be really cool. And I've heard this talked about a few times, not in relation to Theater of the Mind, but you'd have to, is people playing D&D or tabletop RPGs like on the road, driving, doing a long like cross-country drive, and so everyone's playing on the road and someone rolls for the driver or something. That'd be pure Theater of the Mind, you know? And that could be really fun because it's more portable. You don't need to bring anything, just yourself and maybe some dice. Or you can use your phone for a dice roller. That could be fun.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, I don't think the driver probably should not be the DM because that'd be a lot to process while you're driving. But that'd be.
Let's say you've got somebody that just loves driving, wants to show you guys around, doesn't really play D&D. Have them be the driver.
Yeah.
And then there's got to be some sort of magnetic whiteboard.
It's probably some stuff.
You can get a whiteboard that's magnetic and dry erase would probably scrape up while you're playing. Draw a map on that.
Good.
Get minis or just magnets that you put and have it, on a table if you've got like a van or something. There you go. Nothing's going to flop around. You're going to lose your dice. So get some sort of dice tower or something to contain those boys.
Yeah, one of those little boxes.
That's a cool idea.
I've never done it, but I've seen a lot of people talk about how they played while driving. Or on planes.
Makes a lot of sense.
Planes might be a little tough because there's a lot of people around. And you'd be like, no! Screaming.
Different seats. You're
talking about liches and whatnot. And there's like some poor lady behind you.
No liches? I don't know if you know that meme.
I don't know.
Oh, damn. It's all
I think I do.
Yeah, no bitch,
yeah, I get
no
that.
bitches, no maidens. I'm hip. I'm with it. And I just collapse my mental age by saying that.
Let me see if there's any last thing that I forgot about.
That's all I got. It's an important topic to me.
No, I think I covered it all.
Cool beans. Yeah, when he asks me for topics that we're thinking on, Ryan often does like the video editing and a bunch of other stuff on the side. And then when we come up with ideas, like, you think of anything? I'm like,
yeah, I'm not good at thinking of stuff.
Most of the time I can throw something out. And he's definitely thought of a great deal of the episodes. But thankfully, when he asks that, I just sit there. I don't let myself do anything. I'm like, what are we doing this week? And that one came quick. I was like, I feel like I've had something that I'm thinking about this week that we need to do. And that was it in particular. So glad we figured it out, because it's always going to be a banger of an episode.
And when you're doing Cyberpunk, it's going to be, is that Theater of the Mind?
I don't know. I was supposed to have a session where I was talking with him about how to do it and whatnot. Yesterday was a busy day for me, so I didn't get to. So I need to make my character and whatnot and do a bunch of shit.
Maybe that'll be our episode next week. You're dissecting your thought process.
Well, there is that Pathfinder book that's coming out.
Is that next week?
I think it's next week. The Book of the
Dead. I'm very excited for that. Let me check.
The reason our Abominations Vault stopped before we went to the next session or the next book is because we're waiting for that to come out.
Oh, it is. It's coming out on the 12th. Yeah.
Maybe we'll have to put that if we don't have time,
you might not be able to review it.
Then we can do Cyberpunk Red. If not, we'll do that book and then Cyberpunk Red.
And Cyberpunk Red, yeah, it's not going anywhere.
Wow, we got 2 episodes playing.
Whoa,
man, that's a first.
Look at us.
But yeah, as always, if you guys are interested in continuing the conversation with us, we've got social media, which is at Dungeon Crawl Pod, both on Twitter and Instagram. Been a little bit more active on Twitter, thanks to Ryan, doing a little bit more stuff over there. D&D space.
It's my iPad.
I'm starting to get some comments. We got something from, I don't know if it was Paizo. Who is it?
Paizo, yeah, Paizo.
And somebody else recently.
Oh,
Kobold Press.
Yeah,
That was fun.
Love Kobold Press.
Get us a little we're big now. And we've also got a Discord in the link tree below. That's an even better place to talk with us, learn about how everybody in the community is working on their individual homebrew games, testing it out. This person,
cool homebrew in there.
Yes, person that's doing the Cyberpunk Red stuff is in that community as well, but they're helping me out with something else, so it's not in there. But we've constantly got people.
I don't want to throw them in the spot, but maybe if they're interested in running Cyberpunk for other people,
it's their favorite system.
Yeah, hop in, say you're interested. I'm sure if it's their favorite system, they'd be happy to chat.
They'd love to. So if you're interested in that or any other system or watching any of the games we play, our home game that we've played for about 3 years now, and a campaign Ryan's been doing, or a world Ryan's done for 6 years is going on there. It's about to end soon-ish, probably next few months. You can watch in there. You probably have no idea what's going on, but we do recap sometimes. There's actually notes that we've got we could possibly share. But jump in there. It's a fun time, jolly time. And we also have our email, of course, thedungeoncrawlpod@gmail.com.
Did you say Patreon?
No, we didn't. But hey,
screw you guys.
No, we love Patreon. I think we've had one supporter on for a while. So
very nice.
I think it's Fan6L, something like that, right?
Yes.
Love that dude. Thank you so much for continuing to support us. Anybody else that decides to jump on, genuinely helps us get things that make this look better. We have foam panels that we need to put up before we do the live play. We're about to do a test live play, see if our characters we like. So that'll be the next step.
Level 6.
I think 6. Yeah. Yeah. I want to have at least a moment for me to swap from primary rogue and samurai to primary samurai and rogue to see which one
it's basically just gonna be, I don't know, I need to ask Kenneth for his name. It's basically just gonna be combat stuff. It doesn't matter.
I need something to talk to because I had to test voices. Okay, cool. I'm sure. That's all I got.
Yeah, I don't really have much, man, except for rate us 5 stars and shit.
Let's fucking do it. All right.
Rate us 5 stars and shit on Apple Podcasts.
Well, you just want to poop.
Not on Apple Podcasts.
Yeah. Take a poo every 1 to 2 days. I'm not going to pressure you ever.
Really?
Some people say I was getting crap from my friends online. They're like, you don't do that every day? I'm like, sometimes
I thought about it. I think you know what? I don't think I do every day.
Put a little timestamp on it.
Well, depends on how much protein and how much fiber you're getting in your body.
I definitely don't do it every day. I'm sorry.
I don't know if I do. Please comment down below how many times you poo a day. If you don't,
gonna freak out. They were freaking out at me. I was like, "What? That's a lot of toilet time."
Well, it's like I growing up, I always heard you got to shower every day, and then I dated someone briefly that was like a hair salonist person. They're like, "Yeah, you should wash at least maybe twice every other day."
I can't because my hair's super oily. So
I never knew that.
Yeah.
At least your hair. I don't know about your body. Probably stinks all the time. But
yeah. There was a point where I, like, for the longest time in my life, did not know that you don't have to cut your nails all the way down. For some reason, I always cut them so that there was none of the extra white part hanging off. And you get that really dry hand feeling after you cut your nails. You know what I'm talking about? You can avoid that by not cutting them that far down.
Oh. Do you have nail clipper.
Yeah. Do you bite your nails?
I don't bite them, but I just like pull my gross on my girlfriend. I pull them out off myself. I think it's an anxious tick that I do.
That's difficult though.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah. Sometimes it hurts because you go too far.
This has been hygiene with Ryan and Braxton. Things are hanging out. Again,
watch your cuticles.
Wash them.
No, watch them. You don't want to hurt your cuticles. That's the red part, I think.
That's a little fleshy boy.
I think.
It's a little clear line. You can push it
right?
back. Yeah, you push.
Yeah, it's your cuticle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a little fun little chat down here. Interested to see what he'll tie. It's probably the outro. But yeah, he's been Ryan.
He's been Braxton.
This is the Dungeon Bungeon Dungeon Crawl. Thanks for calling with us.
We'll see you next time for Book of the Dead or Cyberpunk.
Red.
Come prepared.
Not
2077 either.
No. Goodbye.
No Keanu.
No Keanu. Keanu.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Leave.